So I was just looking at my situation. At the time, I'm 23 years of age. I had a college degree. I was living in my parents' home, and I was barely making enough money to give my mom $50 a week as quote unquote rent. That was my situation. And I knew that, as I told you, nobody was knocking on my door. My phone was not ringing to go play pro ball because I only played 1 year high school and I played Division III college. Nobody's looking for their next player from that level. So I knew that unless I did something to get myself seen, heard, and known, nobody was going to see me, hear me, or know me.
My people, welcome to the Principled Minds podcast, where we bring to you a person or a message to help you uncover the core principles of making your vision for your career and personal life a reality. Relax, open your mind, and be ready to receive at least one piece of information that may encourage you to take action today. Welcome to the family. My people, welcome back to the show. Listen, if you are in a position in your life where you're thinking of making a career change of any sort, and you're wondering what principles you can implement today to help you realize the vision that you have for your career, whatever that vision is, this is an episode you do not want to miss. Our guest is a 9-year pro basketball player who is now a business coach that has transformed the lives of over 103 million entrepreneurs, athletes, and business professionals. And he has done this through his books, his 4 TEDx speeches, his courses, and his programs. Today, he's going to be sharing with us his journey on how he discovered his current entrepreneurial path and his framework for achieving success. Listen, I really hope you stick to the end because a lot of great information will be shared on this episode, and I will hate for you to miss them. Without any further ado, join me in our conversation with our guest today, Dre Baldwin. Dre, it is so good to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Charles. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Same here. Let's dive right in. One thing I always love to start my episode with is gratitude. So I'm curious, in the past 7 days, what has put a smile on your face? What has made Dre smile in the past 7 days?
I hired a new assistant. So
really?
Yeah. So that's made me smile because it's taking a lot of maintenance work that I don't need to be doing as a CEO that I now can pass on to my new assistant. She's picking things up pretty quickly. So now I have more space to do higher level tasks. So work on your game is what it's all about. So the more high level tasks I can do, the further the business goes. So that has put a smile on my face.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's actually really good. How long did it take you to get an assistant? Has it been something that you've been wanting to do for a while and you finally did, or you had one and just had to switch it up?
I've had assistants in the past. I've had multiple assistants. So I have other people that do stuff for me in different tasks, but I needed to bring in a new executive assistant because I had one before. It's funny. I trained her so well. She got so good that somebody else hired her away for like triple what I was paying her. So I made her so good that she didn't need me anymore. So she left me.
Oh my God.
So I needed to replace her and get somebody else. So that's actually what the situation was. So for a while I didn't have one. And then the actual process from when I decided to hire one to when I actually hired her it took about a month. And that was only because sometimes I was just slow with the responses. So we do a whole lot of back and forth messaging before I get to the interview process. But once I got to the interview process, it was pretty clear who I wanted to get. And it came down to about 3 people. And then I just re-reviewed the video interviews, and I knew who I wanted to hire. And I decided on Friday. She started on Monday. So it was that quick.
Yeah. That is amazing. That is really good. Yeah, that's a downside sometimes. You put a lot of efforts training and then someone else takes them and then you have to start afresh.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm actually curious, what process did you put in place to ensure that their transition is smooth? Because I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of people have, especially business owners, setting up a system to, allow for you to then bring in people to take that system and run with it. How has that process been for you?
Great question. I would like to say I'm just a genius and I came up with it on my own, but it's not. That's not the case. I've been in other people's programs who teach you how to onboard people the right way. So being that I've been in those programs, there's a guy named Alex Sharfin. I'm not sure you're familiar with him. I got to give him credit. He's a person whose program I was in maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And in his program, his thing is all about operations. It's not about how to make more money or sell or any of that. It's about operations and tightening up your business. And in that program, he talked about that and also about the hiring process. So everything I learned from his stuff, I still apply to this day. So when I bring somebody on, I know exactly how I want to teach them, what I want them to get. One step at a time. All right, let's make sure you master this part. Then we add on another part. Then we add on another part. Then we add on another part. And also just making sure that they're getting what they want to get out of the job as well, because people don't get jobs just for money. Right? People want something other than money from a job. Maybe they're attracted to it because of the money, but there's other things they want to get from it. And we got to make sure they're getting that. And I make sure I'm very transparent with them in that conversation so that they can be transparent with me.
That's really powerful. And I think not a lot of people think about what their employees would need besides money. It's more like, you wanted a job, I'm giving you a job and I'm paying you for it, but taking that step back and saying, hey, I'm assuming this happens through a conversation. Do you get to do that before they onboard, or you do that afterwards?
It is actually both. So they're asked in the interview process, hey, what do you want to get out of this job besides money? Of course, you're going to get paid, but what else do you want to get out of it? And they give you some answers. And then once I hire someone, I have that conversation with them again. Like, listen, we're going to have regular conversations here that is not just about, here's how you do this task and here's what you need to do better, but also, where are you trying to go? Like, how can I be a resource for you? Because that's one of the things that will hopefully keep people in a job, because they know that they're getting something out of it other than money, because somebody could always pay them more than I'm paying them, right? And the better I make them, the more attractive they become to somebody else. So what else is going to make this job sticky for a person who becomes really good? Because if I train somebody, they're going to be very good. They're going to be top notch. After 3 to 6 months, they're going to be great. Now, what's going to keep them in this job? Because somebody could always outbid me on price. So that's why I need to make sure that they're getting something other than just money from the job.
That is powerful. That is powerful. Well, you're essentially helping them work on their game as well.
That's right. That's right. 100%.
Which is what your brand is really all about. So thanks for sharing that. So this episode really is going to be focused on self-discovery and fulfillment, but not just talking about it on the surface level, but truly understanding what we need to do as individuals to identify or discover what our calling is, realizing what our vision is, and then what steps we need to take to make sure that we fulfill that vision that we have for ourselves, whether it's for our career or for our personal life. You are a full-time entrepreneur, and you've authored, I was mind blown when I saw this, you've authored 33 books, probably even more, and performed 4 TEDx talks on discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative. You have over 142,000 subscribers on YouTube, and your daily solo work on your game podcast has been downloaded over 6 million times. What does that make you feel?
What does it make me feel? I don't know. I've heard it so many times that I don't feel anything. But in general, it just means I put together a body of work. That's really how I look at it. But I don't look at it as like I need to kick back and relax, because all those numbers that you said, I know people who've done more than all of that. So I'm not so self-satisfied with it, because I know I got a lot more in me that I can get out there. I got more books in me. I may do more TED Talks. We'll see. I know I can get more people following me on the internet, and I know I can get more people to listen to my show. So all those things I know I could do more of. So you kind of get used to it, I guess, the best way I can put it.
Yeah. You mentioned a really interesting point there. It's like, no matter the level of success that we get to, we believe there's always more. Where do you think that thought process comes from in general? Because I think a lot of people feel that is, I know I'm here, but again, I would also check myself on that, because not everyone is as ambitious, right?
That's right.
But for you, why do you think there is more that you can give? What is it about you that makes you think that, okay, yes, I'm here, but I think there's more to give and there's more to show?
No, well, I 100% know it. So first of all, I know that like this year, one thing, 2023, I told myself I wasn't creating anything new. So I could have wrote 10 books this year. I didn't. I didn't. I had 33 at the end of the year. I'm going to have 33 at the end of this year. So I knew I wasn't going to create anything new. I could write 100 books if I wanted to. I just knew I just wasn't going to create it. So I know that I can create more of that. I know more people are going to find me on the internet and start following me. So those stats about views and subscribers and all of that, those are definitely going to go up. And as far as talks, maybe I could do more of that. And at the same time, I associate with a lot of people who are out there in the game. They're playing the same game that I'm playing. And I know there are people out there doing more than I'm doing. So sometimes I look at their stuff and I see their numbers and I'm like, oh, mine are nothing compared to them. And I'm a competitor. So I don't look at it like somebody has 10 times as many downloads to their show as I do. I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as, okay, so there's a whole lot more that I could be doing. There's a lot more people out there have never heard of me, but have heard of this person. So that means, let me see, maybe there's something I can borrow from their process, their strategy that I could possibly use. And being that I'm a competitor, again, I don't look at somebody's doing more than me, or they're making more money than me, or they have more customers than me. I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as, okay, let me see what I can borrow from them that I can apply to myself, because clearly there's a lot more game out here to be played that I don't know about, clearly, because look at where they're at and look at where I'm at. So there's a lot more to go. So I am proud of what I've achieved, but it doesn't make me complacent in the least.
So take us back. One of the key purpose of this podcast is really to help people realize their vision and understand the key principles to turn whatever it is that they have as a vision into reality. You've talked a lot about, just within the past few minutes, about you being competitive and you wanting more and doing what it takes or whatever is needed to keep pushing that needle for yourself. Take us back. What context do I have to know? What does the audience, anyone listening now, need to know about your environment growing up that has helped you develop the mindset that you have today?
That's a great question, Charles. And the answer is I'm an athlete. I've always been a competitor. So I played a little bit of baseball, a little bit of football, finally settled on basketball. And it was pretty late. I was 14 years old when I really just got into basketball, which is late if you're trying to play college ball, let alone pro ball. But that was the situation. I only played 1 year high school ball, sat the bench, and I scored 2 points per game in high school. So I tell, and that was as a senior. So I tell people, you know, if you score 2 points a game in hockey or soccer, you're in the Hall of Fame. Right. You score 2 points a game in basketball, you're nobody. So I was competing against not even other players. I was competing against the circumstance, because then I went to college. I was going to go to college either way, but I walked on, which is basically nobody knows who you are. You literally walk in the gym and just try to earn your way onto the team. And I was able to do that, but I was only playing at the Division III level, which is the third tier of college sports, which doesn't produce pro players in any sport. Generally, most of pro athletes come from the Division I level. Getting out of college, I wanted to play pro ball because I felt like I was still developing and growing, and I felt like I had the potential. But again, same time, nobody was knocking on my door. Nobody was offering me an opportunity to play pro. So my first year out of school, I worked a couple regular jobs, quote unquote. I worked at Foot Locker as an assistant manager. I worked at a gym called Bally Total Fitness, selling gym memberships. Bally's out of business now, not because of me, because I was a good salesperson. I made a lot of sales at Bally. But that was 2004, going into 2005, to give people a frame of reference here. And then I went to an event called an exposure camp, which is basically like a job fair for athletes. You pay to go to these events. And I paid for an opportunity to showcase myself against a bunch of other pro level players. And we we're all trying to display that we're good enough to play pro. And I was able to kind of play my way into pro ball through that exposure camp. I had to pay for my opportunity to get paid to get into pro basketball. So this was not the normal route that most athletes take. And the whole time I was just competing against the circumstance that was in front of me. Yes, I was competing against other players, but it was the circumstance that I had to beat. So I've always been of that mindset of, here's the situation, here's the game that I'm in. All right, now I understand the game. Now, what do I need to do so that I can actually win this game or defeat this game or get to the next level of this game? So I've always looked at things that way, and still to this day look at things that way. The sports world is a little bit more cut and dried and black and white than the business world, because the sports world is just one scoreboard and you can see it. The business world is much more complex, and there's a lot more the complexities involved, because you're dealing with people and personalities and opinions, and things are very subjective in the business world as opposed to the sports world, where it's black and white and objective. But it's still a game, and you just got to learn how to play it.
You paid your way to get paid. Can you explore that a little bit more? Why
Sure.
do you think that was necessary for you to do that?
Because I was working at Bally Total Fitness before that. So if I didn't do that, nothing was going to happen.
And I asked that question too, because a lot of people sometimes do not understand the level of sacrifice that you need to make in order to get what you want, right? A lot of people think that just things just come to them, you know, and you may need to do the very minimal, or put in the most minimal effort to get the maximum return. In some cases, it works, right? But for you, you know, you decided that you were going to do more, to invest more in order to get you to where you wanted to be. Why do you think that was important for you to do that on a more granular sense?
Yes, a great question. So I was just looking at my situation. At the time, I'm 23 years of age. I had a college degree. I was living in my parents' home, and I was barely making enough money to give my mom $50 a week as quote unquote rent. You know, that was my situation. And I knew that, as I told you, nobody was knocking on my door. My phone was not ringing to go play pro ball, because I only played 1 year high school and I played Division III college. Nobody's looking for their next player from that level. So I knew that unless I did something to get myself seen, heard, and known, nobody was going to see me, hear me, or know me. So what there was one resource back then. If you want to play professional basketball overseas, there was one place to look, one website. And on that website, they would just list these events called exposure camps. And it would tell you when the event is, where it is. And you go to the website, you see how much it is. And listen, I was planning, the camp fee was $250. It was not that much money, but I was looking at the event. The event was in June. I was looking at it in January. I had to start planning, like $250 saved up. I had to plan that, right, at that time, because that was my circumstance. And also I had to plan, how do I get these days off from work? Because anybody who's ever worked in any kind of retail, you can't get 3 straight days off. That doesn't happen, right? So I had to negotiate with my boss, all of this stuff. This is a whole process that I had to do just to get those days off. And then there was no guarantee anything was going to happen. Like, I could have went down there because the event was in Orlando. I was in Philly. So Orlando to Philly, we rented a car. Me and a couple of my college teammates who also had professional ambitions. We rented a car in Philly and drove to Orlando, which is about a 15 to 17-hour drive for those who don't know the geography. Hopped out of the car Saturday morning at 9 a.m., which is the exact start time of the camp. We got the car on Friday, got there on Saturday morning, and we started playing. I could do that at age 23. Probably couldn't do it now, but did it then. And the whole thing was, and this camp is only 2 days. This is not like some month-long camp. It's 2 days. You got 2 days to play your way into an opportunity. Because the people in the room, the people watching, are scouts, agents, coaches, etc. And they're just evaluating you. Never heard of you. They're just evaluating what they see. And you had 2 days to earn your way on it. And I remember telling myself during like the first time out of the first game, like, Dre, you spent your last $250 to come here. You better do something. Because if you don't do anything, is right back to Bally Total Fitness. And who knows where you go from here? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you ain't got any more disposable cash. So what are you going to do? Right. So I knew I had to do something to get myself seen there at that camp. And even when it was over, Charles, I didn't immediately get signed to a contract. It's not like this was some Disney movie. I didn't get signed to a contract right on the spot. I went back to my job at Bally. I had to be back at work on Monday. And that's when I started selling myself to get my next step. I won't tell the rest of the story here. Maybe we'll get to it. But my whole mindset was, if I don't do anything, to answer your question, if I don't do anything to get noticed, I will not get noticed. They're not coming to find me. I had to go find them.
Why basketball?
Well, I tried baseball for a little while, and I knew my ceiling in baseball was mediocrity. I wasn't really that good at baseball, and I didn't really get to play football. I never got the equipment, so I never really played football. My family couldn't afford the football equipment, so I never really played football, so I don't know. But I doubt I was made for a kind of sport where you just get hit as hard as possible. My body's not made for that, so I like boxing, but I wouldn't have done it for a living. Like, just getting hit as hard as possible is not my thing. So football, combat sports, no. So basketball, and the areas that we come from, like, everybody plays basketball. Every young man at least tries to play basketball. So in my neighborhood, everybody played basketball. That was the place where everyone was at. And the good thing about basketball, as opposed to football or baseball, is that you don't need really any kind of fancy equipment, and you don't need another person. As long as you have a ball and a court, you can play basketball all day by yourself. Whereas baseball, you kind of need another person. In football, you need other people. So that's the convenient thing about basketball. And it was available to me. So that was around then. I was kind of built for it. I got long arms, long legs. I'm tall. I'm black. So I must be good at basketball, right? So that's why I gave it a shot.
I love that. I'm actually curious. So in our journey to self-discovery, one thing that I have found is that the people around you make a huge difference in contributing to that journey. What was your perspective or your experience with, your parents, your family, as you went through this journey of identifying that basketball was what you wanted to try out? What was that experience like?
It's a great question. It's a question I would have to ask my parents. I never really asked them in detail to tell me what they thought, but I'm not sure what they were thinking. I think they were like, I hope this works out. What is this kid going to do? Because I have one sister. She's a year older than me, and she went the kind of like the normal route, that when you go through the educational route. She was a really good student, went to like all the best schools, and she's a college professor to this day. So she got all really good grades, went to the best colleges, scholarships, all that, and she became a professor. Like, damn near perfect route. Now, I went to college. I did good enough, graduated. And then I'm saying I'm going to be a pro athlete when I had no prospects to be a pro athlete, right? And I didn't really want to, quote unquote, use my degree, even though I had a degree. I wanted to go this completely alternate route of being a pro athlete. And then, even then, when I started doing that, next thing I did was get on the internet when it wasn't even a thing. This is like 2005. I'm putting videos on YouTube. Like, who's doing that? Like, I'm blogging. Right? That was not a thing. Nowadays, if you do it, my niece and nephew, who are my sister's kids, they're teens. They're like, they want to be YouTubers when they grow up. That's normal. But in 2005, you're blogging and YouTubing, you're like a bum living in your parents' basement who needs to get a real job, right? That's the way people are looking at you, right? But now, if you're on the internet doing stuff, now people think, this is a great idea, great business business idea. So I think my parents were just hoping that it worked out. I mean, they knew that they had laid a good foundation, but I think they were just hoping, all right, whatever he ends up doing, I hope it makes sense. And to this day, I don't think my parents could tell you exactly what I do for a living. Like if you ask my parents, what does he do? They probably couldn't tell you. I think they were just here a few weeks ago. They were here to see my son, who's just a year old. And I was telling them, no, because we were in the elevator and somebody said to me, because I'm often in a suit, they said, man, you're always in a suit. What do you do? And I said, I'm a business coach. And my mom was like, oh, is that what you call it? A business coach? And I was like, yeah. So all these years, she finally gets here. So.
It's like, finally, I know what he does.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. I mean, sometimes, you go through this journey and some people just don't get the support. Some people just don't get the support from their families as they're in that journey of discovering who they want to be and, the path that they want to follow. And not everyone is going to agree with you or understand what you're doing. Because for me, from my perspective, I believe each and every one of us have been called to do something. Each and every one of us have been assigned a vision. And it's really up to us to discover how we uncover that vision and take the actions to turn that into reality. What were some of the doubts that you faced as you were, well, before I even talk about that, so you got signed, you said in 2005, you said?
Yes, that's when I started.
Okay, 2005 you started. During that time you were still in college, or that was after
this
college?
After college. Graduated 04, started in 05.
Started in 05.
Yeah.
Talk us through your transition from being a pro athlete and then transitioning into what you now do now as a business coach. What was that journey like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I got to give you a couple pieces to this story. So back in maybe my sophomore, junior year of college, I responded to this bulletin board ad on campus that said, you want to make some extra money? Because, college students were broke, especially athletes, because back then there was no name, image, and likeness. You couldn't make money. So you just had no money. You had you're a full-time student and you play a sport. It was like 2 jobs. So we had no money. So I responded to that. Turns out this guy who put up bulletin board. He was a network marketer, and he introduced me to this concept of network marketing. I went to a couple of hotel meetings, and most people listening to this, probably you've been dragged to a hotel meeting or you went voluntarily. I go to the meeting, and the people in the meeting are talking about these principles of business that I had never been taught. And I have a business degree, and the things they were talking about, entrepreneurship, were not being taught on my college campus. And I said, man, this is eye-opening what these people are talking about, because any of you who's ever been to a network marketing meeting, and I didn't stay in the industry, of course, but in network marketing meetings, about 80% of the meeting is not about the product or services being sold. 80% of it is just about breaking your old beliefs about money and business. So that's what they were doing. And I said, man, this stuff makes perfect sense what they're talking about. So that was in my head. And they would say, hey, go get the personal development books. And this is a phrase I never heard before. He said, when you leave here, there's a table outside and these women selling books. They're personal development. You need to buy these because you got to build yourself up in order to build your business. Because you don't build you can't build the business, because half the people in the room are already in the business and half the people are guests, right? So they would always say that. And I was like, personal development, what does that mean? So I went and looked at the books, and these speakers, they would name drop these people I never heard of. They would say, make sure you read that Brian Tracy, that Jim Rohn, that Tony Robbins, that Napoleon Hill, that Zig Ziglar. I was like, who are those guys? I never heard of them before, right? I'm in college at this point. I never heard of this stuff. And I saw the books and I said, all right, these look interesting. These look like the kind of books that I want to read, because I've always been into human psychology. Always been into figuring out how the brain works and how our thoughts lead to our actions. I've always been into that, but I didn't know there was a phrase for it. I didn't know there was a genre, and I didn't know people wrote books specifically about it. So when I went to these meetings, I'm 21 years old at this time. I'm like, oh, there's a whole world of people in this. This is a thing. So at the time, again, I'm a broke college kid. I couldn't afford the books, so I didn't buy the books. I went back to my college campus, got on my computer, and I went to eBay, because this is before Amazon took over. So I went to eBay, and I bought pirated copies of 2 of the books. I bought Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and I bought Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. 99-cent Word documents. These are complete stolen copies of the books. All right. And I bought them, and I read both of these books, just the Word documents on my computer. And I remember reading Think and Grow Rich, and I'm like, oh, so there's a way that you can basically program your mind to be more successful. So I kept that in the back of my head. And then I read Kiyosaki. I remember the first 2 chapters of the book. I'm like, oh, there's a whole different way to make money besides just get a job. I said, oh, okay, there's another way to do this. So I kept those in the back of my head. And I said, I'm going to play basketball when I get out of college. After basketball, whatever this guy Kiyosaki's talking about, I couldn't quite explain it to anybody then. I said, whatever he's talking about, I'm going to do that. And he was talking about entrepreneurship. No one had ever taught that to me. And again, I have a business degree from college, and this was not taught. So about 2009, about halfway through my career, I played a few places overseas at this point, but there were times where there were gaps in my career. The phone simply was not ringing. So you think of an actor or actress in between jobs, like they're waiting for their agent to call with the next job. There was no the next job wasn't coming. So at this time, I'm unemployed, and I'm like, okay, I'm in my mid to late 20s here. How am I going to take some control over my life and over my destiny? Because I can't sit and wait for the phone to ring. Now, at this time, I had just finished reading another book. I've always been a big reader. My mother's an educator, so I've always been into reading books. It's probably what led to me writing books. And I just read this new book that was kind of like, it was like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but it was made for the digital age, for people who now were on the internet. But it was a similar principles. And this book was called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And in that book, Tim is talking about similar things, about how you can run a business and you don't have to do everything by yourself, and you can outsource and you can use employees and you can put systems together. He was saying the same thing Kiyosaki was saying, but he was talking about doing it through the internet. And I remember reading Tim, and I've been reading his blog and stuff, and he talked about how, okay, here's a way you can test out if you have a product to sell. So I'm getting to answering your question here. I just had to get that background.
Oh, no, I love it.
Yeah. So he said, you can go to this website called Weebly, which still exists to this day. You can get a free hosting platform, and you make a one-page website. And this is what you do. You say what the name of your product is going to be, whatever your product is at this time. And you put it on the page. You say, here's the name of the product. Here's what it does. Give a little description of it. And then you put a button that says, buy this product for X, whatever your price is going to be. And so what I did at that time, I had these videos on YouTube, and they were all basketball. Everything was just teaching people how to dribble, shoot, do basketball moves. So I had all these basketball people watching me on YouTube, but I wasn't making any money from it because there was no money to be made from social media at this time. There was no such thing as an influencer at this point. And I had all these fans watching me, but they would ask me, hey, can you make me a program so I can practice how you practice, Dre? And I would always say no, because how am I going to do that? I had thousands of people asking me the same question. Now with Tim's idea, I said, okay, why not just make a training program for basketball players? So I made one, and I priced it at $4.99. And I did what Tim said. And he said, when someone clicks on that button, don't sell them the program. Send them to another page that says, this product is under construction. If you want it, just put your email address in, and when it's ready, we'll email you. He said, don't send this to the people who already know you, because they might put their email address in just because they like you. You need to get some people who don't know you to verify that this is actually a viable product. So he said, go to Google AdWords and put $5 on advertising for the keyword that you're selling about. So I went and got basketball training. I put $5 on basketball training keyword and ran ads to this one page. Now, as a caveat, I got to tell everybody here who's listening, in 2023, you cannot do this for $5. It'll probably cost you about $50 or $500. But back then you could do it with $5. So I did it with $5, and I'm running ads, and people who never heard of me were clicking on this page, and they were putting their email address in. And Tim said in his blog, if people are putting their email address in, you have a product that is sellable. Go make it and sell it. So I went and made the program, and I started selling it. And I put a video on YouTube and said, introducing my new program. I made 2 programs, one for dribbling and one for shooting, $4.99 a piece. And this is 2009. Now, I remember back then I had the BlackBerry phone. You ever had a BlackBerry back in the day? Okay, so this is before I switched to the iPhone. So I had the BlackBerry, and back then, if you got an email or a text on the BlackBerry, there's a little red light that would start blinking. Remember, the red light blinked, and it said, congratulations, you made a sale, $4.99. And when I made that sale that night, I said to myself, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Because what I did, Charles, and at the time I didn't know the phrase, but I had just created some intellectual property. I had taken an idea out of my head, turned it into something real, and exchanged it for money. And I said, all right, I'm still playing ball, and hopefully the phone rings again, which it did. But I know I'm not going to be able to jump and dunk over people forever. Eventually, this is going to run out. But my brain, the power of my brain is not going to expire. If I can take ideas out of my head, turn them into something that other people value, and put a price tag on it and make money from it, I could do this forever. I don't even need basketball. The phone doesn't ring, I'm good. So that's what I was thinking in 2009. So that started my transition. Now, luckily, the phone rang again, and I kept playing ball till 2015. But from 2009 to 2015, I was already building the brand and laying the foundation, and I started writing books, and I started making courses and more programs for ball players. I was doing that for the last 5 years of my career, playing ball and doing this at the same time. So my transition was a little bit different than the average athlete. What I tell people all the time, Charles, is that let's say I had been signed to the Lakers with a guaranteed 10-year contract, my transition would have been harder because I would have never paid attention to anything other than basketball. I would have said, oh, I got guaranteed money coming in. I don't have to worry about after basketball. Let's just focus on basketball. And the day after my career ended, I would have had to start from zero. But because I didn't have that guarantee, I didn't know the phone was going to ring again. I started focusing on what if it doesn't ring? And I started building what became the foundation of what I have now while I was still playing. So I kind of had two things going at the same time. And in 2015, when I decided to stop playing, I already had plenty of momentum. I already had an audience. I had an audience of people who didn't even know that I played pro basketball because they would just follow me on the internet with the stuff that I was doing online. So my transition was a lot smoother and I had a lot more momentum when I went full time than most athletes do.
Let me guess, you are enjoying the conversation. Well, if that's the case, share the episode with a family or friend. You never know who could be impacted by this conversation. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe so that you'll be the first to know whenever we release an episode. And take a screenshot of the episode and tag me on Instagram at Principled Mind so that way I will get to know you and also get to know what you think about the episode. All right, let's get back to the show. What doubts did you face in this journey that may have in any way made you question yourself or question the path you were on? And how did you
business
manage
journey?
it? Yeah, transitioning from, being an athlete to being a business coach.
It's a good question. I didn't really start the coaching part till probably a little bit. I didn't start coaching till after I was completely out of basketball. Really, what I was doing, the first things I was doing was just making programs and just selling them one off. And then I started making courses and books. So I was doing those three things. And then I had like ad revenue coming in from videos. So that's really all I was doing. I didn't get into the coaching part in maybe 2016-ish after I started doing like professional speaking and things like that. And that was, I didn't really have doubts about it because I didn't start coaching out of some random idea. I started coaching because somebody asked me. I used to do live streams every day. And somebody was in the comments once and said, "Hey, are you a coach?" And I said, yeah. Yeah. And we got on the call and he said, "How much for coaching?" And I made up a number and said $500. And he was my first client. And after I did that, I said, "Oh, so people will pay me to tell them this stuff? Okay. All right. And I started coaching.
Do it.
So yeah, that's what yeah.
I love it. So what would be your advice for, because there are a lot of folks that are looking to make various career transitions, and these transitions are tough for some people. One is because it could be something that they've never, explored before. It could be an interest they've had for years, but just didn't know how to execute. And maybe going through some level of doubt, hindering them from taking action. What advice would you give to those people?
Man, and there's the person in transition.
Yes.
Man, the biggest thing is you want to create momentum. And that momentum is very important because when you have momentum, usually it leads to confidence, and that confidence changes the way you show up, changes your approach, changes your posture. And people respond to you differently when you show up with a different energy, even if you say the exact same thing you said yesterday. So the biggest thing is to create that momentum. And the way you can create momentum is, of course, you got to just start. But a lot of times for people, it's hard for them to do that. I would say the easiest way to get into it is to get around people who already have the energy that you want, which means the good news about that today is that you can plug into somebody's podcast. You can follow them on Instagram. You can read their books. You can, and those don't cost you anything for the most part, very low investment. You can hire them as a coach. You can get into their mastermind programs. You can buy a ticket to go to their event. Get around people who already have the energy that you want to have and are already carrying themselves the way you want to carry yourself, because their energy will create momentum for you. It'll rub off on you. And then you will have that confidence. And that confidence is a big deal. It's a really big deal. That confidence is pretty much everything. And that is sourced from you having the momentum. And that momentum comes from you taking the action. The action comes from the discipline. The discipline comes from the structure. I tell people this all the time. Structure creates discipline. Then it trickles down into everything else that people actually want. So that's what I would have somebody doing. They're trying to transition. Get around someone who already has the posture that you need or that you want.
So we've talked a lot about self-discovery, how you went through, identifying that you wanted to pursue basketball, transition into developing programs, and then coaching. What is a framework that folks can keep in mind as we wrap up this self-discovery segment, that folks can keep in mind as they are in that journey of self-discovery? What are top 3 things that they need to make sure they have top of mind to help them discover the path that they should be going on?
Man, great question. So number one, it's get around is what we just talked about. Get around other people who already have that energy. Get around people who are already in that space. So that would be number one. Number 2 is the discipline. And the discipline framework that I talk about is called the third day. And the third day is the decision that separates the pros from the amateurs. And that is understanding that no matter what you decide to do, whether you're playing a sport, you're starting a business, you're writing a book, you launch a podcast, whatever it's going to be, eventually the novelty wears off, the welcome party ends, and you realize that this thing that you signed up for is not just one big fiesta. There's some actual work that needs to be done. And you're not always going to feel like doing the work. And that's the moment that separates the professionals from the amateurs, because there you get to decide, are you going to show up all the way or are you not? And it doesn't matter what you do. Any job that any of us sees somebody else do that looks like a really fun job, guarantee you it's a job somewhere in there. You may not be able to see it from the outside looking in, but it is a job. So how are you going to make sure that you show up every day, even when you don't feel like showing up? Because you have to do that if you're going to be a professional, if you're going to get paid consistently, especially if you're going to have people following you. You're going to have people who are subordinate to you and they're following your lead. You better show up because they're not going to do any more than you do. So that's the second one, it's that third day, which is about the discipline and the consistency. And the third thing for a person who is in that transition and they're just trying to figure out what they want to do, there's so many that I can give you, is really just putting the standards in place and understanding that it's not supposed to be easy. A lot of people have this false idea. They come into the world believing that things are supposed to be easy. If it was easy, as the saying goes, everybody would be doing it, right? The reason most people don't do certain things is because it's not easy and people don't want to step out of their comfort zone. Even though everyone understands the concept, they understand logically the concept of the comfort zone. Emotionally, many people don't want to step out of their comfort zone. They only want to do things that are comfortable for them, that are easy for them, that they can kind of baby step their way through it. The problem with baby steps is babies walk too slow. All right, you're not going to get to where you want to go fast enough. You're going to run out of time if you just go at the pace of a baby. It's like when I take my son on a walk, if I go on a long walk, I got to put him in a stroller because he's too slow. Right? Baby steps are too small, right? So I got to put him in the stroller so we can get there faster. And it's the same thing for all of us. And what I tell people when it comes to standards, two main standards, if everyone just did these today, you need to change your default settings from slow to fast, from later to now. If most people just did that, that would change a whole lot in a lot of people's lives.
So let's talk about fulfillment. How did you come up with work on your game? Because I think the tenets you have covered in that framework, discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative, if done consistently, can truly help with helping anyone progress in their career. How has those core tenets help you? Oh, let's start with how you actually discovered those 4 tenets and how you incorporate that in your life to ensure that you are fulfilling that vision that you have for this particular brand.
That was in about 2009, around the same time period where I started creating products. At this time, I had a nice little audience on YouTube, again, 100% basketball players. And they would always just ask me questions about how to get better at basketball. And I remember I made this video, it's still on YouTube to this day, where I was kind of just venting to the players because I had my camera with me. This is before we had the cameras on the phone. So I had a camera with me and I was finishing a workout at a 24-hour fitness at like 4 a.m. And I remember just talking to the camera and saying, like, the reason many of you players are not getting better is because you're spending too much time watching YouTube, watching people like me instead of actually practicing. So your problem is you're watching YouTube, you're playing Xbox, you're standing outside in the corner, but you're not practicing. Then you're wondering why you're not getting in the game when you get on the basketball team. So I said, what you need to do is turn off this video and go work on your game. And I put some colorful language in there mixed in, but the whole point was work on your game. People loved that phrase and people just started repeating it, work on your game. But that's perfect, Dre. It makes perfect sense. And it took me about a year to realize it, but I said, I need to just brand everything under that umbrella of work on your game because it's not even limited to basketball. Because I knew my future was going outside of basketball, but work on your game doesn't say basketball, it just says work on your game, whatever it happens to be. So that's where it came from. And the pieces, those 4 tenets, came from the questions that I was being asked by the players once they got a feel for who I was. So at first, Charles, they saw, all right, this is a guy who we never heard of, but he's good at teaching how to do moves. And he shows me how to do the crossover and how to jump higher and how to shoot. So he's cool. But then once they kind of saw that I was serious and I was consistent, they just start asking about my background. And they found out 1 year of high school, walked on in college, hustled his way into pro ball. Right now he's unemployed, but he's still working out every day. So they start asking him, why come to the gym every day? Why are you doing that? Like, you don't even know if you're going to get another call. How do you motivate yourself to keep working out? Or in a game, how do you have the confidence to perform in a game when everybody's watching, as opposed to in practice when nobody's watching? Or given your background, Dre, your high school, your college, you're trying to make it in the pros. How did you keep the vision alive in your mind that it's going to work out, even though it's not always working out? And there were times I'd be in an empty gym in Miami working out, and they'd be like, you're in this empty gym and your phone's not ringing, but you keep working out every day. Like, what's the mindset behind somebody who does that? Like, they just want to know. Or they would ask, how do you get started with all this stuff? How do you begin? How do you begin if you want to play ball overseas? How do you begin if you want to get known on the internet? Because now getting known on the internet was actually becoming a thing. So I started talking about these things, and the answers to those questions were these 4 pillars: discipline, show up every day, do the work; confidence, put yourself out there boldly and authentically; mental toughness, keep showing up and putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is late to the party; and personal initiative, be that go-getter who makes things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. So when I started talking about those things, that's kind of the transition period where my audience went from being exclusively basketball players to people who did not play basketball, because they would hear me talk about those things. Because what I was doing was, I started doing this video in 2010. I started doing this video every week called the Weekly Motivation. So it'd be like a 3 to 5 minute little selfie video, again, before selfie videos were a thing. And I'll just be anything that was on my mind mentally, mindset wise, that athletes could use, but anybody could really use it. And the interesting thing, Charles, when I started those videos, it wasn't because it was a new idea to me. It was stuff that always occurred to me, but I thought everybody thought like this. Like stuff I was talking about, I thought this was just normal ways of thinking. But when I started putting it out, I realized that most people did not think like this. And many of the things I was talking about had never occurred to many people. So when I started putting those out, this is when the non-athletes started coming into me and saying, Dre, I follow you to catch that weekly motivation. And I did the weekly motivation every Monday. And I put that video on YouTube every Monday for 400 Mondays in a row. And that created the transition from athletes as my audience to everybody as my audience. Not everybody, but people who didn't play sports necessarily, but they were looking for that mindset piece. So that's kind of how it happened.
That's awesome. Now, discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative. A lot of people get discipline. They understand the concept. I just don't think, taking the action is something that they're doing, right? Consistently. So I don't want to dive into that. Confidence. I think people understand what confidence means, but I'm more curious about mental toughness and personal initiative. How can someone build? What are the practical things that someone can do today, that I can do today, to help me build mental toughness from your perspective and experience?
The first thing is understanding what mental toughness is about, and that you can't build or reveal mental toughness till you're in a tough situation, which means you got to step out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to step out or be pushed out of your comfort zone. And most people understand the concept of the comfort zone, but when it comes time to do something that would actually be uncomfortable, they don't want to do it. They hesitate, or they go back to where they were before. Even though 5 minutes earlier, they were talking about all the reasons why they know they need to get uncomfortable, they don't want to actually do it. And this is like that point. It's that inflection point in everybody's life. We all have these moments where, okay, you can either stay comfortable and stay where you were, or you can take the red pill and go another direction. And a lot of people don't want to do it. When it comes time for them to actually take the step, they don't do it. And this happens in the gym. You got a personal trainer who's pushing you to do that last set that you don't feel like doing, or you're talking to your business coach and they're telling you to go publish it, do a live stream every day for 10 minutes. And you hate talking on camera because you think you look dumb and you don't know what to say. Or the person who's telling you put a new email out for 5 days straight and you don't want to do it because you don't know what to say and you don't like how you write. Or whatever the situation may be, get on stage and speak for 5 minutes in front of an audience of 200 people, and you feel you're sweating and you don't like public speaking, whatever it is. All of these, we all have these moments where you could go this way or you could go that way. And it's the thing that you do that pushes you out of your comfort zone that allows for all the change to happen. And if you want to stay where you are, then keep doing the things that you're comfortable with. But if you want a different outcome, you had to do something different. Again, logically, everybody understands this, but when it comes time to actually do it, people don't want to do it. Because emotionally, the inertia of who you've been is fighting against this new idea that you just got 5 minutes ago. And what I like to say to people, Charles, is think about it. If I'm explaining to you, we're having a conversation, we could be talking for 5 minutes or an hour. I'm giving you an hour of, let's say I'm talking to a person, not you necessarily. I'm talking to a person, and for an hour, we've been talking about all the changes that you need to make and that you want to make. You've been thinking about making these changes. You want to make them. And now is the chance for you to actually make the change. We've been talking for an hour, though. You got 35 years of how you've been living. All right. So 35 years against 1 hour, what's going to win? All right. Most of the time, 35 years wins. This is the reason why most people don't change. It's not because they're not aware of the change that they want to make, or at least they may not know exactly, but they have a general idea of what kind of change they want to make, but they can't make it simply because their emotions, the lizard brain, as we say, is fighting against this new idea that you just got 2 days ago or 3 hours ago or 30 minutes ago. That's why that emotional energy is needed to move people to action. Because if all it took was to move people to action was logic, then there'd be a line outside the library, right? And the reason why there's not
100%.
is because people need to be emotionally pushed outside of their comfort zone, and most people resist it so strongly that is why they don't change.
How do you reverse that for someone that is going through that right now? You know what you need to do. Because I think a good amount of us know exactly what we need to do to make progress and to succeed. But how do we reverse that 35 years of bad habits?
You got two options. As a practitioner, as a salesperson, I got two options. So option one is you have to be really, really good at moving people emotionally. You have to be able to trigger people emotionally. You can't just give people the logic, because if you only give people the logic, you're only talking about 2% of the population. Only 2% of the population is genuinely ambitious. Everybody else is ambitious in speech, but they're not really ambitious. You got to move them. You have to be able to trigger people emotionally, because emotion overpowers logic every day of the week. So you got to get them to an emotional peak and get them to move right there at the moment. This is why somebody who can get on stage and sell from the stage, these people are very powerful, because they can create that group effect of getting everybody to go and do something. Whereas if you were talking to them one-on-one, you couldn't move them to action. So that's one, is you got to get good at triggering people emotionally. That's option A. Option B is you can just limit your audience to the 2% who are actually ambitious, and you don't have to do all that, and they'll be willing to move already. So you just got to get good at finding them. So those are your choices.
I have a question. What would I have to do as the individual that's developed 35 years of bad habit, right, to reverse that habit in order for me to take action to make progress in what I want to make progress on?
You got to ask yourself, and this is what I did with myself when I wanted to make it happen in basketball. Because if I was going to make it happen, I knew I needed to change what I was doing right there in my life. I need to change my situations. Ask yourself, if things keep going the way that they are currently going, where are you going to be in 5 years? Where are you going to be next year? Where are you going to be in 6 months? And are you okay with that? Usually the answer is no. So really it's a matter of asking the right question. So even when it comes to as a practitioner, as a person who's a coach, is when I'm having conversations with people and I'm looking to move them to actually take an action so that I can help them help themselves, is I got to ask them the right questions. Because if it just comes from me, then they can say, hey, Dre's brilliant, sounds good, but they're not going to do anything. It has to come from them. So you have to ask yourself the right questions that trigger the right emotions that will move you to the right actions. And then once you trigger those emotions to move yourself to actions, you got to put the structure in place that does not allow you to go back to where you were, because the next morning that emotion will have subsisted, right? How do you keep yourself from going back to your comfort zone of where you were before? So that's why it's so important that once you get people to commit to an action, you got to do something to keep them in there so that they can't go back to where they were before. And because a lot of times people kind of come undone after they have they make a commitment when they're at an emotional peak, but they don't stay at that emotional peak. Emotions go up and down. You can't depend on an emotion. So you got to put the structure in place to make sure that after you make that decision, that decision becomes real, and that requires an action. A real commitment requires an action, not just words.
How do you stay consistent? You release videos very frequently. Throughout your journey, you have seemed to have just excelled at almost everything that you've done. And I'm curious, how does Dre Baldwin stay consistent?
Structure. Number one thing. And number one thing that creates consistency is, well, consistency comes from discipline, but discipline is a result of structure. And the challenge a lot of people have with consistency is that they think they need to make themselves consistent, and then they'll put a structure in place, when it's actually the opposite direction. You put a structure in place, or you access a structure that's already in place, and the result of that structure is discipline/consistency. So it's about putting the structures in place. And the way that my brain works is I'm a structural thinker. So I'm always thinking about, how do I say things? I was just telling my assistant that in our conversation this morning, like, anything that you ask me that is not answered in documentation, we'll make sure we get it documented, so we never had to answer this question again. Right? Everything needs to be structured. So everything is about structure in my life, making sure that the same things the same way every time. I tell people I work with that, and I practice it in my own life. So if someone wants to be more consistent, you have to put a structure in place, and a structure does not have to be some big complex thing or even system. People use the word systems in business. People talk about that all the time. System doesn't have to be some big complex thing. A system can just be getting a piece of paper or open up Google Docs, step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way to step 7. This is how it's done. That's a system, as long as you follow it. So the structure in the system is just writing out and planning out what are the steps of what needs to happen and doing it. You see that it produces the result, then you just do it over and over and over again. You have a structure, and that leads to consistency.
To summarize fulfillment segment, in order for you to fulfill your vision or your goal, you need to have discipline, you need to stay consistent or build confidence and maintain that confidence. You need to build mental toughness and then take personal initiative. Can you just quickly share what you mean by personal initiative in the context of fulfilling your vision?
Personal initiative is about being a go-getter who goes and makes things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. So in other words, in 2005, when my phone was not ringing, nobody was checking for me to play pro ball, and they would not have checked for me, I went and did something that caused them to notice that I existed. And then when I got home, I had to call agents to get them to know that I existed. And then when my phone wasn't ringing again, I had to do it again. And the same thing in the business world. I got known on the internet by taking the initiative to put videos on YouTube. And then I started making money from it by taking the initiative to create products. And then I went and wrote books. When self-publishing became a thing, started writing books. And then got on when live streaming came out. I used to live stream on Periscope. You remember Periscope? I used to live stream on Periscope. That's where I got my first coaching client, from live streaming on Periscope. And then when he said, "Are you a coach?" I said, "Yeah." I took initiative. All right. And put a price tag on it. And I said, "Okay, I could do this with more people," and kept doing it to get into the speaking world. Like most of the keynote speeches I've done and every TED Talk I've ever done, I reached out to them. They didn't call me. I called them and went and made that happen. And it's the same thing that I still do to this day. To this day, still every day, we do outreach, meaning people who never heard of me before, we're reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, here I am, and here's why we should do something." All right. So I'm still doing that to this very day.
What are 2 pieces of advice you would give your younger self, and one encouragement you would give your current self?
Number one, get involved in personal development as early as possible. So I get a lot of young people ask me that question. So definitely personal development. So I found out about personal development. I was in college. I was like 21. I will have my son, when he's old enough to read, we're going to be reading personal development. So we'll read the No Sesame Street, and then we're going to read some personal development. So as early as possible, get into that. And number 2 is get the right people around you. I mean, I can give 1,000 pieces of advice to my younger self, but number 2 is get the right people around you. Law of association. You become the average of the people you spend the most time with. And it doesn't matter how many it is, but you are becoming your associates. And if you don't have great people around you physically, then you can associate with somebody through the internet. That's the great thing about the world we're in now. You can associate with somebody by subscribing to their podcast or following their YouTube channel or liking their page on Instagram. So you can be associates with someone who you never even met in person just by consuming all their material. So just pick the right person.
What would you encourage Dre Baldwin today? Be an encouragement to yourself today.
Today? It's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that one. What would I encourage myself today is keeping in mind those default settings that I talked about. This is something that I've been thinking about today. Something I've been constantly thinking about recently is those default settings, fast and now, instead of the defaults of slow and later, because that tends to be how a lot of us just operate our normal mode of operation. So that is knowing if I do things fast and now, I have the intelligence and I have the pieces in place to make things happen. We just need to make sure we're condensing time, because time is the most valuable resource we have, and is the only one that's not renewable. Money is renewable. You can get more energy, you can get more attention, but you can't get more time. So making sure that we're using time the right way, using it smart.
Have you found yourself deflecting from that recently? From your default setting, fast?
Oh no, that hasn't normally been the default setting. But when it occurred to me, I said that's what I got to change to. So I'm constantly reminding myself to stay fast and doing things now, because if I don't think about it, because it hasn't been normal, then I would usually do things slow and later. It doesn't mean I won't get good stuff done.
Yeah.
I have a good amount of accomplishments, but I feel like I could accomplish a lot more if I'm going faster now. And the longer I'm conscious about it, then eventually it becomes a habit to where I don't have to think about it. So right now I'm still thinking about it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, 2 final questions. What is the best financial advice you've received, and how have you been able to implement it?
Pay yourself first. Easy one. Pay yourself first. And I remember when I first heard that, I didn't know what it meant. But now I understand it. And I even tell people in my audience that the same thing, especially when people say they don't have money, right? They say they don't have any money to invest or things like that. But pay yourself first. The way I implement it is when money comes in, I use multiple accounts and I move some money to a tax account because we got to pay taxes, move some money to a personal account, which is my money, move some money to an investment account. And that's the money that can grow. And then we can use the rest for operations and bills and whatever else needs to be paid for. But number one, pay yourself first.
Say and complete the sentence. I have a principled mind because.
Okay. I have a principled mind because principles are the standards upon which a person's life is built. And your principles are non-negotiable. They do not change. And your life will be a reflection of whatever principles you have in place or a reflection of your lack of principles.
That's a mic drop right there. Dre, thank you so much. It's been a delight speaking with you. I've learned so much just, having this conversation with you. And quite honestly, very similar to your episode on the table with Anthony O'Neill. And for anyone listening, if you haven't watched that episode or listened to that episode on the table, I actually can't recall the episode number, but search up the table Dre Baldwin, and there are just several gems that you shared on that episode that still sticks with me to today. And I just want to say thank you for the service that you have issued people, the lives that you have changed. And we're deeply inspired by your journey. But I'm more grateful for you being here on the show and sharing this virtual space with me today.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your platform here, Charles, and I appreciate the opportunity and great questions as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from your audience. Thank you.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at Instagram. Instagram is at Dre Baldwin. I do send out a daily motivation text for free. That number is 305-384-6894. So if anybody just texts that number every day when that message comes out, you'll get it straight to your phone free of charge.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay.